Thank you for your patience. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to you all to this 2022 AGM of the Friends of Sunrising. This will, in fact, be our 9th such AGM. The more observant of you will have noted that we are not this year in our usual venue of Tysoe Village Hall. We're here today in the Methodist Chapel in Oxhill. The principal reason for this being that usual venue is currently undergoing some significant renovations. I think I'm right in saying that the floor is subsiding or collapsing. So we felt that was too much of a distraction for me to work with as my audience sinks into the ground. Alternative, we would have liked to hold this in the Longhouse, that being the new building that's currently being constructed at the burial ground, of which I'm sure you're all aware. That too is very much still a work in progress and certainly nowhere near finished enough to host a meeting like this. So hopefully next year? Next year. My part in proceedings this year is fairly minimal. The bulk will be being done by Emma and by our newest trustee, Belou. So a presentation of the very highest level, and a huge relief to those of you who were steeling yourself to listening to me trot out my old jokes for the 9th year. David too, whom you all know, is also going to take part, not least to give Emma a break, because as recent experience has shown, if she talks too much, she will actually lose her voice. So this is not just a musical excuse. It's all a bit fragile, so there may be some quick changes. As this warm-up act, I will limit myself just to these opening remarks, a few housekeeping notices. The agenda. I will literally just read out what you see here. Much of it is familiar to you, I know. We will just go through the aims and objectives of the Friends. We'll touch on the trustees, the membership. We'll move on to the fund. Belou will go in some detail through the events and the projects, the developments, more about the nature reserve, more about how you, should you wish, can become more involved. And they will finish with the date of the next AGM and with any other business. So, I will now hand over to Emma. Emma.
Now we play with height. I'm the smallest one. Bruce isn't the tallest one, so we'll be going up and down with the height. I have a problem with my tonsils, so I'm going to talk for as long as I can. I'll try and do my sections, but if I do just lose my voice, I'll hand over to David. So thank you so much for coming. You look like a small group, but I kind of like that. One of the things we're thinking about with doing the AGM at the Roundhouse next year is this will be about the number who can fit. So if it works on today, that would be lovely, and we could hopefully be at the Longhouse next year. So first of all, this beautiful little fellow, or lady, can't tell the difference really between male and female robins, but on a bench just to talk about, for those of you who don't know, and partly just a duty to remind you of the aims and objectives of the charity, the Friends of Sunrising. Our constitution is all about what is written in our constitution, which is registered with the Charity Commission, to provide and maintain or assist in the provision and maintenance of a natural burial ground at Sunrising for the public benefit, and to promote for the benefit of the public the conservation, protection and improvement of the physical and natural environment at Sunrising, in particular by promoting biological diversity. In other words, looking after, helping to create the natural burial ground and the nature reserve. Now, what that means in practice will evolve over the years, but at the moment, the key is about raising a capital fund, because when there's no longer an income coming in from burials and memorials and other things happening at the site, the Friends of Sunrising, the charity, will take over. So we need money there waiting for that day. But on top of raising the capital fund, It's about the support, as it said in the Constitution, supporting the creation of the natural burial ground and the nature reserve. And also looking at you here and everything that we're doing, it's about nurturing the community of those for whom Sunrising is a really important place, either because they want to be buried there themselves, or because they have a loved one buried, or simply for the nature reserve. Because it's that community, it's you, that will help to secure, to maintain, to get that capital fund going, and to make sure we've got a functional community when it looks after the burial ground itself. And of course that will change over time once the Friends is looking after, is managing, is funding the care of the natural burial ground of the nature reserve, then the nature of the charity will be quite different. So trustees. Some changes this year. We lost 2 of our trustees. We had 7, now we're down to 5. That's 2, Elizabeth Gray and Lizzie Bean. Lives just got too busy. So we thank Lizzie and Elizabeth for everything that they've done for us. We will be looking out for more trustees, and if you're interested, do come and talk to us. But the trustees are going to sit down and talk through what we need in trustees, and how urgent or important it is to get more. At the moment, we're quite happy with what we've got at the moment, but we're always happy if you'd like to come and talk to us because you're interested. Just love this rich yellow lady's bedstraw in that picture. So our current trustees are the motley crew you see in front of you. Jane looking gorgeous in pink, and you've got Bruce the funny man. You've got Belou and David and myself. We have different roles. Belou doesn't have a specific role, but she just picks up and does whatever is needed, including due diligence on finances, and I as treasurer have her just checking that everything I'm doing is right. Membership. So the charity is set up so that we have subscribing friends, that's you. And the value of being a subscribing friend is that you are actively supporting the objects of the charity. It's always nice to see how we work in terms of the numbers of friends. That green at the bottom is the steady base of new friends coming in. It's less this year, we don't know why, and if it carries on going down, we'll have a look at why we think we're not getting so many friends, new friends. But that blue bit is wonderful. That blue bit is those of you who keep resubscribing, who are committed to helping us. And the yellow is the folk who have forgotten to resubscribe, or they come back because they get re-inspired by some event or some project. But the numbers keep rising. So at the moment we have 331 members, which is brilliant. It's a really good number, especially if you think that we have 1,470 exactly individuals laid to rest at Sunrising as of yesterday. So 331, if you think of that 1,470 as not all different families, but a lot of families, then 331 is a good 20%-ish, over 20%. So it's a really good percentage in terms of people continuing to want to support. Go back to that first bit of the practical, what is the Friends, the fund? The key purpose of the Friends is raising that capital fund. And the source of that fund is the most reliable bit, the consistent base, is commission. And that commission is a percentage of every grave that's sold. So that's the money that comes from the company to the burial company, to the Friends. And the next bit is fundraising. That's you, that's all our glorious merchandise, that's all the projects that we do, the events, and donations, legacies, it's all of that wonderful stuff. And then gift aid and interest. Gift aid is enormously useful. It really is. The number of people who tick their gift aid box, and we are ending up getting £1,000, £2,000 a year in gift aid from the government, which is brilliant. If you feel like you're paying too much tax, then don't worry, some of it's coming back to the friends. And interest, of course, interest is plummeting. It's going down, now starting to go up a tiny little bit, but I'll talk about that in a minute. So let's look at what we've actually got. The fund total at the end of the financial year was, a few days ago, the 31st of August, was £1,169,000. That's £28,000 we raised last financial year, which is excellent. It's less than the 33,000 from the year before, but that was because we had a few large legacies and big chunks that came in the year before, and also people are just on a bit of a squeeze, aren't we, really? Times are a bit trickier. But it's still a really good curve, you can see that. I always throw out a target for next year. How about 190? That would be nice. Or even perhaps with a legacy or two, we might top 200,000, which will be worth me putting up one of my silly pictures with a big, what do you call it? Blowing, celebratory, buzzing thing, which is what we did when we hit 100,000. So thank you, everybody. Wonderful. And here it shows you that balance. So on the bottom, the blue, that's the commission. Not the biggest element of where the money's coming in, but a steady base. And the green is the fundraising, donations, merchandise, all of those bits and pieces. And then the yellow is that gift aid and interest at the top. Now, one of the reasons that inspires me to give to a charity is if I know that they're not spending huge amounts of money on administration, salaries, all of that nonsense. So how much of my donation goes into admin and how much is actually for the charity? At Sunrising, the only outgoings as yet are these. Gambling license. Why do we need a gambling license? For raffles. For the simplest gambling that every English charity does. You know, your raffle, your tombola, things like that. That's £20 a year. Website and email, £15. The fundraising regulator, which is just a standards body, £50. And the big chunk goes to the accountant who just checks our figures are okay and makes us all right with the charity commission. So annual, 565. At the moment there are no wages. None of our trustees have really ever charged expenses. Bless them, they can. And for events and things like that, any other real expenses are paid for by the burial company. So at the moment our outgoings are really, that's annual, they're really low. Total 565, or about 2%, which is pretty good. Occasional, of course, we do have other expenses, printing leaflets every 5 or 6 years. The collecting tins cost about £5 each, about 10 years ago. Postage now and then, these little trustee badges, which we haven't had done for a while. And performers and speakers for events. Now Belou will talk about that a bit later, and about how we pay for speakers and performers. So where is all that money? Where is all this wonderful dosh that you have given us and trusted us with? First of all, we have a fixed term bond in Cambridge and Counties Bank, coming to an end next year, and we'll have to find another one. And then we've got a deposit account where money comes in and just has a little bit of interest. That's with the charity bank. So everything we invest with the charity bank is used for charities. And then there's our current account, which is the co-op, which is the best high street ethics for the best high street bank, which we can access out here in the villages. If we were in town, I could use something, but some of the more ethical companies, banks, I can't access from the village. But all of these, the fixed term bond, the deposit account, and of course the current account, the value is dropping because all of that interest is less than inflation. at the moment, which is why we've been looking at investment. So keen to invest in an ethical way, making sure that none of your good money, of our good money, using for this good, wonderful purpose is going into pharmaceuticals and oil and drugs and guns and whatever, these dreadful things. We did lots of research and looked for a lot of advice, and we have been working with a company called Ethical Investors based in Cheltenham. And we decided as the trustees to invest £90,000 of our 169, and it's going into two different funds. First of all, a cautious, balanced fund, which is very safe. It means that the return is fairly low, but it's very safe. All of your donations, legacies, fundraising is in that one, not all of it, but that's where we put yours. In the balanced growth fund, which is a bit more risky, so we get a bit more of a return, we agreed to cap the amount that goes into the balanced growth fund to the amount that the company gives to the charity in terms of the commission. So none of your good money, it's just the company's money in the slightly riskier fund. Now the important thing is that we're looking at 30 years. We're not looking at what kind of a return we can get by next Christmas. We're not looking at, it might go up and down over the next 2 or 3 years. We're looking at investing for 30 years, hoping that the charity won't need the money for 30 years. And the world would have to be radically different from what it has been for the last 150, 200 years of capitalism for our fund not to increase significantly over 30 years. So that's our hope, our belief, our confidence. So with 169,000 at the moment, 90,000 in investment, that leaves 70,000 completely safe, but slightly losing its value. And we will keep looking for better options for money. Now, if anybody has any advice, any experience, any ideas, please let us know. You're always open to know, to do what's right. Legacies, we've had a couple recently, a little small legacies. This is something I always feel embarrassed about asking, but it's an important part of our long-term security. If someone leaves us £2,000 or £3,000 or £5,000 or more, even that small amount from your average sort of estate where someone's selling their house when they die, may be a small amount, but it's a huge amount to us. So for those of you who have someone laid to rest here or would like to be laid to rest yourself, then it would be wonderful if we could encourage you to pop a little note into your will. We've got a legacies leaflet which explains how if you need more guidance, but otherwise just go to your solicitor. I managed to talk through that. I'm now going to hand over to Belou for the next bit.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Emma. So, as I'm sure many of you are aware, we run a variety of events across the year at and for Sunrising. Some of these are designated fundraising events, whereas the other events are run by Sunrising as a company, but we often have a friend's stall there. Those events are more often about the community that the Friends supports and the nature reserve. Fundraising isn't really the main focus there. Now, it's probably worth mentioning, again, COVID. It was still sort of very much part of life this last year, although with all the widespread vaccinations and some common sense, we were able to run a few more events than the previous year. We have been cautious of too many commitments, also because of the ongoing developments, but Emma's going to speak a little more about that later. Nevertheless, we did have some great events this year, starting with Lizzie and Simon's quiz back in February. A huge thank you to Lizzie and Simon Bean, who raised a grand total of £858 for the Friends through their online quiz. I have to admit I was awarded the wooden spoon that night for the worst team score, but it was still a great night. So thank you again, Lizzie and Simon. Now, this year we were able to hold our first open day since the pandemic. We still kept it a fairly low-key affair rather than advertising it widely, but we still had a steady flow of people attending, all interested in learning more about sunrising. Here we have Jane running our Friends store, as she is today. And in addition to the money that we raised from the Friends products, we raised £96 on our refreshments table, which was a great result for our first open day back. Nature walks, something else we were able to begin again this year. We had 3 walks around sunrising, each attended by about 10 to 14 people. And a testament to these walks was just how oversubscribed they were. So we're really hoping to be able to hold more in the future to give opportunity to those who were unable to come this year. And we raised £68 on the refreshments tables across these events. The jazz afternoon. After cancelling in 2020, we were lucky enough to welcome back Alexandra's Washboard Trio, although a last-minute alteration meant there was no Alex and no washboard. However, I think those that attended can agree that the duo still put on a great afternoon of jazz. Those that were there will probably also remember that it was quite a rainy day, and despite this inevitably affecting the number of attendees we had, we still managed to raise an amazing £603. Half of that came from our refreshments and the other half came from the raffle, tombola and teddy bear map. And a huge thank you to Jane for all the time and work she put into creating those and running them on the day. So thank you, Jane, from all of us. Now, Emma mentioned earlier about outgoings. So instead of paying out of the general accounts for events like this, we have a sponsorship fund which enables friends to donate money specifically to pay for musicians. Now, the main upshot of this is that all the money we raise on the day can go to the friends. We don't have to take any of that money out to pay for the musicians. Now, this year, the £240 that we paid the musicians almost cleared out our sponsorship fund. So we want to put to you a few different options that we're considering about how best to proceed. The most obvious one, of course, is to raise more of this sponsorship fund so we can guarantee payment for musicians in the future. Another alternative we've considered is ticketing these events, so that's something that we're considering. Additionally, there's a chance that musicians, bands, they might be willing to perform for free with no charge. So if any of you in the audience have someone that springs to mind, a group or an individual that you think might be interested in this, please mention it to them, have a chat with us. We'd be really interested. And if there's any other feedback or ideas on how best to solve this, I'm not going to call it a problem, in the future, so we can guarantee our fundraising for the Friends, then do just let us know or pop something in the suggestions box. The Moth Night, something else we were able to hold again this year after cancelling both 2020 and 2021. It was a great success, and this is an example of an event organised by the company. However, in time, it could be that events like this are run by the Friends themselves. So although it's not a specific fundraising event, it's extremely important in its role supporting the community and definitely for the nature reserve. So Peter Cranswick of Slimbridge Wetlands and Wildfowl Trust, there we go, gave a really interesting and engaging talk on moths, and that was followed by a guided moth night all around sunrising. We did consider charging £4 a ticket for this. we decided not to in the end, to keep it a free event and just have our refreshments table and a donations tin. And the £96 that we raised, we worked out would have been the same amount we'd have raised through tickets. So I think that's quite an interesting point. And it's also worth mentioning and celebrating, as you can see, this was actually the first event we were able to hold in the Longhouse. Although it's still very much in construction, we had a beautiful evening. You can see the sunset there. And I think it was a really exciting taster of all the events to come for those of you that might have been there on the night. Now, a really nice story from Moth Night is that Peter, who gave the talk, he'd been speaking about the reductions in number of moths and mentioned the blood vein moth as an example. A beautiful moth, as you can see on the screen, whose population reduced by 79% over the last 20 years. Now, the very first moth to be found in one of the traps on Sunrising was a blood vein moth. Peter was lovely saying that that's why places like Sunrising are so important, and he's right. I think we can all agree that Sunrising is important for so many reasons, and to have physical proof of that is something that really should be celebrated. So I hope you all agree on that. So what events have we got planned for the next year? Coming up next, we've got our planting weekend on the 15th and 16th of October. We're hoping to have plenty of bulbs, wildflowers, and our specially curated wild seed packets. We do ask people to order ahead their bulbs and to book in a collection time just to make sure people aren't waiting too long on the day. So we'll be sending out a list shortly of what's available. Keep an eye on your emails and we can get all that booked in for you. Armistice Day. So we hold a small event every year on Armistice Day at the cairn, as you can see on the screen. Now, the cairn was originally erected at Sunrising to acknowledge all the traumatic effects of the Civil War, especially in the surrounding villages, and especially the First Battle of Edge Hill. Also, however, recognising the peace that is now held at Sunrising. On the day, we gather at 10:45 in readiness for 11 o'clock. Our event is completely non-religious. We share a few words. There's a moment's silence and the bugle. So if any of you do want to attend, everybody's welcome. We just gather to remember and give thanks for the peace that's at Sunrising. Winter events. So whilst all the developments are ongoing, as Emma's going to go into more detail about, we're not going to be holding any events this coming winter. However, once the Longhouse is complete, we're already compiling some ideas for Christmas 2023, so watch this space. And speaking of 2023, there are some events that we know are definitely going to happen, we just don't have a date for them yet. And the best way to know when these are going to happen is either through our website or on the mailing list. So do keep an eye on both of those for when the dates are confirmed. Our open day in May, hopefully in the completed Longhouse, which is very exciting. And we're also considering how best to hold our Roll of Remembrance. You might remember that in 2021 we did a filmed version of this. Next year we're going to have sort of almost 1,800 names we think to remember. So we're just considering how best to produce that. We'll let you know when we've worked that out. And of course, as we mentioned earlier, the nature walks, hoping to have lots more opportunities this year for people who were unable to make it this year. Projects. Now for an update on a very important element of our fundraising, our projects, the outcomes you can see on here, and we've all got on display today. Starting, of course, with our jams, jellies and chutneys, the best of which are, of course, made by Sunrising's friend Jonathan Fletcher. Many of these made with fruits from Sunrising. Now, Jonathan really is one of our fundraising heroes. So a huge thank you from all of us. Jonathan hiding over there. Round of applause. Since 2018, Jonathan's enormous amount of hard work and results have raised a whopping £2,724 for the Friends. And we do have the last few jars of this year's stock on sale. So if any of you are running low, do pop by Jane on the Friends stall and stock up. Tea towels are 100% cotton tea towels, adorned with artwork from professional artist and friend of Sunrising, Philip Bannister, who's also here today. Thank you, Philip. Now, this is our new summer design featuring the wildflower meadow, which you can get in a wonderful pair with our autumn design, which has got the pond and the roundhouse on there. Now, despite taking a while to come into profit, the autumn tea towel has raised £933 for the Friends since 2018. A great fundraiser there. Our children's book, So Where Are We Going Exactly? It's a really beautiful, gentle tale about a couple explaining to their grandchildren what happens at a natural burial ground where they themselves want to be laid to rest. Now, this had a fairly large outlay at the beginning, but we are now in profit, £135 to be exact. And again, these include Philip's beautiful paintings with words from the writers group. Our hair purses, another of our amazing friends, who's not here today sadly, Carol Stripe, has been making these beautiful fabric purses embroidered with the Friends hair logo, designed by Tim, who is here. Thank you. All the material Carol uses is recycled. It's old shirts or jeans. Another wonderful fundraiser, as you can see, and we've got some beautiful blue ones on display today. So thank you to Carol for her continued hard work on this project. Now, I have the very exciting opportunity to introduce a new addition to our Sunrising products range, all sold in aid of the Friends. This, as you can wonderfully see here, is our new jute bag, all made in England and displaying our Friends hair logo. Today is the first opportunity to see, and if you'd like to, purchase a jute bag. So do check them out on the store later if you're interested. Our key rings still steadily bringing in profit, with the potential for raising more important funds as time goes on. And another favourite, using the logo designed by Tim, are our lapel pins. Big thank you to Tim, and an incredible amount raised since 2015. Even more talent here, we really are lucky. This time on the calendar, adorned with photos by photographer Richard Ellis. Profit with our second print run is now at £1,842. So a really incredible fundraiser there with the calendar. Our cards, photographs by our very own Emma. New pictures are printed every year. This is a continual fundraiser for us. We've got current summer cards on sale today, and although our winter cards are yet to be printed, we have got order forms. So if you'd like to put in an advance order, do let us know. You can see here the designs we're having printed this year, the 6 new photos coming together in a pack. And the last of our fundraising projects, the honey. Yes, we've still got honey. The bees have been gone for a few years, but it's still extremely popular, great honey, and a wonderful fundraiser for the Friends, as you can see. So all in all, I think we've got some pretty incredible products there, thanks to much of the talent that comes from you as Friends. So big thank you to all of you. If any of you have any ideas or thoughts about new projects or anything like that, do let us know. We're really keen on hearing from you, so do grab one of us and have a chat or pop something in the suggestion basket. It'd be great to hear from you. And that is all from me. Back to Emma.
to another strepsil. I might manage this bit. So I'm just going to talk about a few developments at Sunrising. This is to update you on what's going on. And we talked a little bit about the gradual shift from I'm going to use a pointer on this. So gradual shift from this being the main car park to this becoming our main car park. Or rather, this being the car park for events and funerals, and this one being which you can use for visiting, which will mean it will be easy to come to Sunrising. Because we are now generally burying around here, it makes sense for us to start moving to the north. You can see here the big change, the development is up here. This is really exciting because it's the culmination of so many years of preparation, of ideas, and it reflects what David and I have wanted to do, which is to get in the last of the infrastructure before we retire. We've got through the planning hoops for our new buildings, and we started building in April. This is Robin's cabin. It's the new cabin at the north entrance, and it will be used for meetings and gatherings just as the cabin is down at the bottom. It's a smaller building than the cabin at the bottom, but it's just a meeting room, so the meeting room itself is a little bit larger. You can see it's all done apart from a ramp. The ramps are going in the end of September, so it's not usable yet. So there'll be a ramp coming down. We've called it Robin's cabin as opposed to Nova's cabin. So Nova's cabin is the one at the bottom, and you can see with Nova's cabin that it's really settled in. So Robin's cabin, in a while, all of that greenery and the trees around and the ramp and everything, and it will also just start to change colour to that gentle grey of the old cabin. And the other building, you can see here, that's Robin's cabin there, and then the building at the end is our eco-toilet and urinals. We're advertising it as a sit-down eco-toilet and a stand-up urinals. To be very 20th century, 21st century, and not to gender it to men and women. It's just, if you want to sit down, this is where you go. If you're happy to stand up, that's where you go. They're all eco-toilets. We're still completely off the grid. There's no pipes and sewerage at all. We work it all out for composting. The urinals too are waterless, and the urinals will have a wood chip floor. Again, no ramps here, no paths. They will all be put in later in. Importantly, we have discussed with the trustees and with others whether these are open to the public all the time or whether they're locked. We were thinking about a way that friends could maybe have a code and they could, so a subscribing friend has a code and they can get in. We just can't work out a way of doing it that is secure. Hi, Josh. This is our small mammal fellow, just arrived. So we've decided that we don't have the capacity, we don't have what it takes to keep public toilets clean. We just can't do it. So we are going to keep them as toilets that are only open when there's a member of staff on site for funerals and for events. If we can change that in the future, we will, but at the moment we just don't think we can. This is the picture of the Longhouse. As we showed you in the newsletter in the spring, and I think even maybe at the AGM last year. This is the design. This is the Longhouse as far as we've got. So the outer walls and the roof are finished, the skylights are in. The next step is the windows and doors, which we hope will be coming at the end of this coming week. But after that, we've still got ramps and paths. That's the front. Or rather, yes, the front with the porch, which will have a half-glazed door and a stone track up to it. And then that's the side view. I don't know if some of you were involved in planting robin wood, but that's the wood just beyond it, which will essentially hide the Longhouse from half of the burial ground and from the lane. But you can see there's no ramps or paths at all yet. And you can just see on the right of that slide, the water tanks. Massive great water tanks, that's 2 7,000 litre water tanks. And they're going to be connected up to all the guttering next week, and they will be hidden by fences. So the fence will essentially carry on from the building and all the way around to hide the water tanks. I'll tell you why we need water in a while. The entrance. This is the bit that was hardest for us to get through planning. Planning application for the buildings was fine because they're simple, but actually getting the council to agree to the entrance was tricky. It requires us, more than anything else, to put tarmac. So we're going to have to put a large amount of tarmac down, and that is because it's a little bit of a steeper slope than the other entrance. So we need tarmac from the lane all the way to where the ground is level, which makes sense. It's sensible. It's just a bit tricky. You can see here where the paths will be, the hard standing around the longhouse and around those buildings, which isn't quite accurate anymore, but it's about like that. And this will have gates and fences, so there will be a gate at the front, which is open during the day, and then there are gates here, here, and here, which will be locked, just as there are gates around the main car park. So it will only be possible to use this bit of the car park unless there is an event going on where the rest of the car parking can be used and the longhouse is accessible. This is the entrance as it is at the moment, of course, and I'm showing you this to show the tatty old gate, which is going to be replaced, but essentially all of this area will end up being tarmacked, and we'll have 2 big gates. It will look a bit raw and a bit official for a while, but it will settle in. We're not going to put metal gates, it will just be wooden gates, and after a while it will all settle down. We may well have to get rid of some of these trees as well, and I'll talk about that later, because they're not particularly safe if we're going to have lots of traffic. But the very next thing that's happening, and some of you might have noticed, is that we are going to lay the last of our stone tracks. So all of the tracks here, those are all in, and this bit is the last of the vehicle tracks which needs to be put in. And the reason we need that in is to allow hearses, disabled cars and the gravedigger to be able to get up to that area, the furthest area, for burials. We may not be burying there for another 20 years. We may be burying there in 10 years, 20 years or 30 years, but all our stone tracks are made of Hornton stone from the Hornton quarries, and they are closing. And we want to make sure that all our tracks are the same coloured stone, so we're putting in all our tracks now. And then this track here, from the longhouse down to here and there, will be a pedestrian track. So not for cars, but it'll be a stone track so that we can get from the longhouse down into the burial areas without having to go over grass in the winter. There's a little bit of pedestrian track here. It's nice because the grass kind of just creeps in, but it's still hard enough to walk on. And some of you will have seen that is, already underway. We've actually dug out the first part of the loop. That soil on the left-hand side will be taken away actually on Monday. The stones will be going in, and then we'll carry on with the digging. So we're already underway with this. As I say, it's really exciting for David and I to be able to be putting in this last part of the infrastructure, which costs so much money. There's more drainage to go in, but I've shown you this photo because it shows you what drainage looks like the day after it's been put in. You probably don't know where all the big drain lines are because it doesn't take long before they disappear. So the big trucks come in, put in these great big pipes underground, fill it all with gravel, and then they work as our drainage, so we don't end up with standing water like most of the surrounding fields when it's wet. This stretch goes from the longhouse, along the front of the longhouse, and all the way down to Dora's Wood. And the next stretch will go down through the loop and along all the way down towards the pond. With 2 entrances, we need new entrance signs, because there's no longer just one entrance. So there'll be a north entrance and a south entrance, and those are the two new signs which are already ready to go up, and they'll be going up over the next 2 or 3 months. So when you go to Sunrising, you'll be told, oh, come to the north entrance, come to the south entrance. That's our old vision map. You'll recognise that. That's what's on the interpretation board by the South Car Park. And this is the new one. So you can see with the last of the tracks and with the buildings now in. So there you had a great big blank bit up in the top corner, and the new one actually shows what's there. And this will go onto our new interpretation board. So the boards by the top car park and by the main car park, the south car park at the bottom and the top. So that's the one by the south car park, and then there'll be one, you are here, up at the north car park. We took off the hair from the interpretation board. It's a shame, the hairs are so lovely, but increasingly you have to be careful of telling anybody that we've got hares on site, because we do have hare coursing in Warwickshire. It's one of the things that makes me want capital punishment. So, funding. First of all, thank you for all your patience with all the developments, the upheavals, all the things we've been doing over the last few years. We have tried to keep you up to date. We've tried to make sure you know that we're looking for feedback all the time, and if you do have any ideas, that you are telling us. One question that people say is, how are you affording this? We know of a couple of natural burial grounds that have overinvested and gone bankrupt. We always decided that we would never ever put Sunrising in a position where it could possibly ever become overinvested or bankrupt. So we have made sure that we have never had a loan, no bank loans, no anything. We're always on that black line, so we're viable. We are affording all of this building and investment because the company has saved money for the last 10 years, knowing that this was necessary. So all of this is being paid for by money that David and I have saved through the company. However, as you can see, we've got new staff now, these two youngsters at the front, and we're going to need more staff as we go on. So we need to put in all of this investment, all of this infrastructure now, before money needs to be used on staff, which is where our savings will be going now into staff. Until 2021, we sold plots in advance, or licenses. One of the reasons we did that was to get in the money that we needed to pay for the infrastructure. Now we don't need money for infrastructure. We're no longer selling plots in advance. It's much better for the company to have money coming in step by step with each new burial. You can, if you want to, reserve a spot in the meadow next to someone who's already buried there. If you're over 60 years old and various other bits and pieces, but it is still possible, but you can't pay for a plot in advance. The other big change that's happening, well, big change for us, is that we, having said that it is possible for some people to have a permit to bring a dog to Sunrising, if the dog knew the deceased and was going from the car to the grave of that loved one and back without doing a walk and without leaving anything behind, then you could have a permit. We've just found too much dog mess and people just taking the mickey, really. So we've now decided no dogs, that's it, and our no dog signs have gone from being friendly little requests to no, big ones really. So these new dog signs will be up around the site over the next couple of months. That means that if ever you see a dog on site, that dog is not allowed to be there. If it's a companion dog for someone with a sight, partial sight or blind, or that kind of thing, then they will have permission from us, or there will be a member of staff on site. But no dogs are allowed on site ever, apart from that. I'm going to go through this bit, see if I can. I might stop at some point. Just a few headlines on the nature reserve. A beautiful small tortoiseshell on water mint. What's been happening with the nature reserve? Heat. We've had 2 periods this year of very high heat, of extreme heat in the high 30s, 90s. The immediate effect on the wildflower meadow of heat is that whatever's in flower goes to seed. Even if it came into flower the day before, it goes to seed. Usually you've got something like knapweed in flower for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. If the knapweed comes out and then you have 35-degree heat, it's gone to seed the next day. Overnight, that's it. Which has a knock-on effect on all of the pollinators. So we had that happen twice this summer in, what was it, July and in August. And our wildflower meadow just got wiped out. Which means all the bees, hoverflies, butterflies, moths, and all the other little flies, without flowers, without nectar, had a knock-on effect on those. And of course, without those little insects and things, the people that eat those little insects also struggle. So it's been a tough year. With trees, it's a different thing. Can I just ask you, how do I get my notes further down? Sorry. So with trees it's different. You get heat stress. A tree loses more water than it can take up in extreme heat, and so it goes into heat stress. And the leaves close up their little holes, their stomata, and if they've closed up their stomata, then they're not photosynthesizing. If they're not photosynthesizing, they're not getting any starches, they're not getting any food, so they don't grow. So immediately you get into a heat stress state, the trees stop growing. Now, it happened twice this year, but the first period was crucial. The second period wasn't quite so difficult for the trees.
Just press the square.
Sorry. And the reason it wasn't so difficult for the trees was because actually we had a fairly wet spring and early summer. Last year, our trees suffered more than this year. Last year, we were in drought in May, June. This year, we're in drought in July, August. Drought in May, June means just as the trees are starting to get going and needing to get their leaves out, there's no water to take up. So the trees really struggled last year, and we were watering trees really early, whereas this year, the trees had a really good go. I remember standing in a woodland and people saying to me, visitors saying, "Oh, bloody awful summer, look at all this rain." I say, "Yeah, but look at the trees. Look at your mum's tree. It's gorgeous. It's filled with life." So actually it wasn't so bad. The meadow, by July, August, the meadow's doing okay. The roots are doing okay in the wildflowers. And that means that they've done their thing. They're happily finding what little moisture they need. They may be happily going to seed where they don't need much more moisture anyway. All the processes are happening in the plants themselves, not taking up water. So they manage okay. It just means they lose their flowers. Trees, yeah, not sure. We did water. Many people ask us how much we water, and they worry about their trees, and I say if you'd like to help out by watering a tree, that's fine, but you need to water at least 5 litres at a time, not less, and you need to water around the roots of the tree, and ideally keep doing it if you're going to start. Some people did, but I asked them to bring their own water, don't take ours, because otherwise they're taking it from our group of the water that we're giving to everybody. But watering, as you see my lovely husband there, it means working 14-hour days sometimes, because he needs to be watering at 8, 9 o'clock at night, or at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. It's hard work. And of course we need to prioritise memorial trees. So although we think we might have lost half a dozen, maybe 7 or 8 memorial trees because of the drought, we have lost quite a lot more of our structural trees. We just haven't put the water on. But trees are pretty resilient. With a drought in August, trees are pretty resilient. They just decide it's autumn. They close up their leaves, they drop their leaves, and they just go to sleep. Wouldn't it be nice to do that? We're also, as you saw, those two massive 7,000 litre water tanks by the longhouse, which will easily fill during a winter with rain from the roof. And we've got another 6,000 litres of water tank behind Robin's cabin and the new toilets. We've got another 2,500 litres behind Nova's cabin, and we've got scattered water butts on every other little building and shed, which adds up to about 23,000 litres of rainwater we can harvest, which we think would last us between 6 and 11 weeks of drought, or being autonomous for water. Buying water in costs a lot of money, £10,000 or something. No, not that much. Lower, a bit lower than that. It's a significant amount of money, and it will get more and more expensive. But also we've worked out which trees really work with climate change and which are not. So we might slowly be shifting what trees we have. Nice thing about nature at Sunrising is that it's starting to take the lead. We started with something that was very human created, and now we're starting to allow pockets where nature is really starting to be in control. That means we need to be responding to nature more and more and learning what it needs and being prompt to tackle anything that may upset the balance. Here you can see Michael's Meadow, which is just starting to come into balance. It looked wonderful in May, June, but then July, with a bit of heat, suddenly there was nothing but grass fetchling. So we're not sure what will happen next year. Also Betty's Meadow and Marjorie's Meadow, this is Betty's Meadow, really grassy this year. That's partly because the grass keeps bloody growing all winter. And then it was too wet to mow in the spring. So it looks like we're going to have to work out what we do with daffodils and cowslips and things, or spring flowers, because we may need to be mowing in March, if the ground is not too wet. I'm going to do a little headliners on pests. Pests, small ones. Not only plants finding their way and their place in the burial ground, but creatures, some of them not so happily and welcome. This year we struggled with viburnum leaf beetle, mostly on the Guelder Rose. We've got 80 memorial Guelder Rose trees, and 36 of them were affected with viburnum leaf beetle. 6 of them were completely defoliated. We caught it just in time with most of the trees, but we had about 30 man-hours of squashing little caterpillars. No point in leaving it to the birds, they're just too many. So I know there are 2 people here, thank you very much, maybe 3, who came and helped with the squashing of caterpillars. Not a very pleasant task, but we did it. Thank you. And in October we're going to have to be pruning all the viburnum to get rid of all the little eggs that have been laid. So the viburnum will all be pruned back and all of that gone into the bin and into a bonfire. It's not going to get rid of the viburnum leaf beetle, but it will set it back hopefully to where it was 4 or 5, 6 years ago. We've had some problems with powdery mildew as well, but we're looking at ways to deal with that. Washing leaves, just gently. Pests, big ones. You can see this is deer eating a wild cherry. We've never lost a tree to the deer, but it's almost inevitable that we will do. The more woodland we have, the more deer are going to be coming to the burial ground. When we're looking at ways of deterring the deer without putting up massive fences that humans can't get through. And pests, interesting ones. This is my exciting bit. All the little spots on this are a rust fungus. Not often seen on wild service trees, but it is, and there's no known cure for that. In fact, some arboriculturalists say, yeah, but it looks pretty, it's fine. But the interesting thing here is not necessarily the rust fungus. Oh, wrong thing, getting muddled up. It's this bit here. That's a leaf miner, you might know. a leaf miner of a hawthorn red midget moth. Isn't that cool? And I even have a picture of one. These are tiny creatures, 8 to 9 millimetres. But isn't that beautiful? So you can see a leaf and thinking, oh, someone's eating my mum's tree leaf, or and that's dreadful. And I'm thinking, no, it's a tiny little lovely moth. Then the awkward natives. Not so much pests as awkward folk. This is a young cucumber green orb spider in there, which is very cute. It's taking out the moisture of the leaf, of the epidermis, the skin of the leaf, in order to make the leaf curl, and there it hides from birds and snaffles up the little insects that come. Also aphids. You might see aphids on trees, especially the crab apples and cherries. We did a bit of leaf washing this year on the baby trees. The large trees are fine. You get covered in aphids, and they're strong enough for the birds to land on the branches and eat them. But the baby trees, the birds can't land because they're too tiny, the trees, and so they can't eat the creatures. So we did a bit of washing, and that's been working out quite well. Weeds. This is where David and I always end up kind of having dramatic conversations, because he wants to get rid of all the weeds and I want to keep some. The little ground saws and willow herbs and pineapple weeds and clovers, and even the kind of common orish and things like that, which are great for, like this ground saw, great for the birds. Linnets and yellow hammers and goldfinches all eat the seeds of these little weeds. It takes a lot of man hours to hand weed the tracks, and we're just about to get more tracks. And David wants to just blast them with weed killer now and then. So I have put up a HIB, my HIB, Habitat Interpretation Board. Have any of you seen my HIB about weeds? Have a look for it. It's up near the North Car Park. And that's a way of saying, I've left these here on purpose. Weeds, big ones. David's better at the big ones. In fact, Libby was brilliant with the big ones this year. This year we've had problems with bristly oxtongue, and last year bristly oxtongue. Year before that it was creeping thistle. That's beautiful, isn't it? A ringlet and a meadow brown on this creeping thistle. Next year David thinks it will be teasels we're overwhelmed with. We just get rid of them as we can. Now some difficult news. These beautiful, huge, old ash trees along the lane. You all know about ash dieback. Ash dieback is killing all of the ash trees here around in this area. They're all going. It will be like Dutch elm disease. They will all go. We just have to take a deep breath and deal with that fact. When they come down, well, if an ash tree isn't going to hurt anybody when it falls, leave it. But we have these great big old ash trees on the lane, and we have public liability if that falls on a car. So essentially we need to be cutting, felling all the big ash trees along the lane. We ideally should be doing it within the next year or two. We're going to see what we can do with different opinions, second opinions, trying to work it out in the best way so that we can make it not so horrible. It's not just ash dieback along the lane, it's about compaction, because we've got twice as much traffic than we did 20 years ago. So it's compacted the roots which are underneath the lane, and it's also their age. We have planted, some of you were here, did some of that planting along the eastern plantations. You can see the lovely old trees, and we've planted trees in there. We've got oak and small leaf lime and wild cherry, large trees, and field maple, as well as some old little ones. But we planted 10 years too late. Really, it's going to take another 5 or 10 years for us to get to the point where those will really take over. But they are in there. We have planted the trees to take over. Exciting news is that we've got areas of woodland now which are complete. So at the bottom, all of that, this area here, all of these graves, this is woodland burial areas, are all full. That means all the trees that are planted here are now just moving from being the burial ground trees to being nature reserve trees. without more graves going in, which is really nice. There's just a little bit left in Tony's Wood here. We planted along the northern boundary, that was the planting area, and now all of that is planted, 265 trees or so. In the drought we lost about 15% of those trees. Some of them we'll replace, but a lot of them will just wait for the blackthorn to come in and take the holes. That grass has all actually now been cut. Our Firmland Birds project, we are looking at more feeding, so we'll be putting up our big feed buckets over this winter. These are for wagtails, tree sparrows, skylarks, reed buntings, yellowhammer. You can see a little reed bunting there. And we'll also put up the mixed feed seeders by the South Car Park again to see what we can do. That's really nice to see a greenfinch there. We do have greenfinches nesting around the site, which is lovely after the problems they've had with Trichomonas. And then just a thank you as I finish. Thank you to all of those who have given us ideas, share advice. Mike Slater from Butterfly Conservation, Alan Pryor and his fellow mothers, Mike Pollard and the ornithologists at the Banbury Ornithological Society, Paul Leadbeater from the Barn Owl Group, arboriculturalists, naturalists like Carl Portman, who identifies our spiders, and Josh, who's out there at the front, who's going to help us more, I hope, with bats and other mammals. So thank you to our associates and partners, and that's me, David.
Well done. So just very briefly to finish off, a quick note about the volunteering aspect of Sunrising, both in terms of just information about opportunities, but also as a reflection of the couple of aspects that we have in our objects, which are of nurturing the nature reserve and burial ground, and also of nurturing the community at Sunrising. So this fulfills both of those very nicely. So that includes opportunities to help with events and fundraising. Thank you for all of those of you who have been doing so over the past year. Help with maintenance and development at the Nature Reserve. Some tasks that I just would not have undertaken by myself without the help of at least one or two or more sturdy volunteers. And of course, as Emma mentioned, opportunities to become a trustee if you want to go into a further level there. This year we set up a mailing list specifically for volunteering, and we've got quite a healthy group on there. The idea being that at a moment's notice we can send out an email. If you happen to be free and the task takes your fancy, then you can come along at quite a sort of low-key event to help out with whatever's needed. That was excellent for the raking that we did at the end of this year, and also for the plaque cleaning that Libby organised as well. So some of the things that are coming up for this year, pond clearing. David, thank you for your help last year. I'm hoping we may see you again this year. That was a big job, but quite fun. And no one fell in last year again, I'm pleased to say. Mulching, that was a large task that we carried out with the drought that we've had this year. Absolutely critical and made a huge difference to the health of the trees and the effect of our watering. So that's one that will be coming up again in February. Plaque cleaning, which Libby organised this year, that was very successful. And again, a big help in terms of just getting everything back up spick and span and to health, and quite a rewarding task as well, I understand. Hay spreading. Chris, I'm going to mention by name, who's here today. Thank him for his help. We had 2 sessions, 2 and 2.5 sessions, where we were spreading the green hay that was cut and spread on the new developing meadow and needed to be spread. And it's a task that really takes quite a long time and quite a lot of stamina. And we did it successfully. It's pretty much all there and done. So thank you for that as well. I'm sure there'll be an opportunity next year, perhaps, for the similar sort of activity. One thing to mention to one side, not directly the Friends of Sunrising, but in terms of our remit with the wider community, this year we had the Tyso Wildlife Group come along once a month in the evening just to spend an hour, and then we would take them round and show them where the wildflower meadow had got to that month. So they saw it through from May to August it would have been. And that was a really nice way of engaging with the Tyso Wildlife Group beyond the outreach of the Friends themselves. So Nature Survey Day is coming up. This year we kept it pretty much in-house, quite low-key, but next year again there may be opportunities to do that survey flora identification as we go around, mapping things a bit more formally. But in addition to that, we've got our butterfly transects which continue. Just a quick thank you again to David, who's sitting at the back there, David Mitchell, for taking on the task this year of every week going round and recording the number of butterflies on the specified walk that we have set up there. So I'm going to hand back to Bruce on that note for us to close off for the formal part of the AGM. Thank you.
And that is pretty much it. And as David said, this is just the thank you. I do this every time, and it's just for me to offer our thanks, not just to those of you who made the effort to be here today, but of course, everyone out there who's involved, who contributes to Sunrising, again, not just through financially, but also, and equally importantly, who give their time and their energy and the volunteering, because, and I know I say this every year as well, this is a community. It's very much a joint effort, a group project. Without all of you, without your energy, your empathy, your conviction, and your belief in what Sunrising is and what it stands for, then all of this, all that Emma and David have achieved would be just so much more difficult to sustain. So thank you all. Hey, I know, this has been such fun. Why don't we do it all again next year? So that is the date we're looking at, one for the diaries. If this entire Russia nuclear spat hasn't escalated rather tediously into global destruction, there will be more cake next year. So, and hopefully, almost certainly in the surroundings of the Longhouse, where we will all be sat looking out at the sweeping vistas of the burial ground.